Hello. Today we're going to talk about, we've heard this all before, so why now? Why is this what everybody thinks is the end of the world? And I don't think it's the end of the world. I think it's the end of an age. But I've had a lot of grief. I've actually been trying for like 2 months to get this message out. And every time God's put a hold on it for some reason or another. So I want to get into it now. We're actually at, when I first started trying to do this, we were a couple months away, then we were like a month away. Now we're like 6 to 7 days away. So why now? You know, people have been on me, they've mocked me. They've kind of come at me from every direction. But the truth is, so why now? Since Christ was here, and the mockers, they like to remind me that, we've heard it many times, everybody said it would be in the world. What makes your predictions any different than anybody else's and everything? And here's the thing, okay? I'm going on biblical guidance here, which I don't know if they did or not. I don't know if I'm understanding the scripture right, but I think I am. I think God has led me to every single piece of this. And I sure didn't know where to find it all when I started this message myself. God led me to every bit of it. And I know people mock that too. God talks to you, he leads you, he does this. Oh, I've heard it all. I've even been called a Satan worshiper because, because my calling, God doesn't call people like that. And I've had every kind of attack there is. So, I'm going to give it to you. You can either heed it. Ezekiel 33 says, I have to tell you, but you don't have to listen. What it says, Ezekiel 33, 7 through 9. I just had a lady on this. I joined this group that's a Catholic Protestant group. I thought it was going to be an exchange. I was just kind of curious. I formed my opinions of things over the years, and I just wanted to see, if any of it was true. Boy, did I find out a lot, but I'm not getting into that message now. But, people, the point is, I've been attacked in every way there is. And it's funny because now I actually get to the point where I look forward to seeing what the next attack's going to look like. So, anyways, moving on. So, why is this different? Why do we see this different than what we did before? And I'm going to explain why I believe it's different, okay? And I'm going to explain why I think the rapture could just be less than 10 days away. And, that's another thing. People sit there and they attack you. Oh, it's blasphemy to do this, and blasphemy to predict the day and the age. Jesus, I went through the Bible. I got kind of nervous about that, so I studied that. And Jesus tells us that he doesn't know the day or the hour, only God. But he doesn't say that we can't guess. He doesn't say we're going to go to hell because we guess. Okay? He just says that he doesn't know. And we don't know. Okay? This is all based on Jewish wedding metaphor. Okay? And I'll get into that too on another message. Sorry, a mower was going by. And this message isn't actually about the rapture right now. It's about what's going on today and why. And I just brought that up because honestly, to me, the rapture is like Thanksgiving and Christmas. You don't really hear a lot about Thanksgiving. You hear about Christmas. You see everything in the stores for Christmas. So you know Christmas is coming. But you know that Thanksgiving comes before that. So we all get ready for Thanksgiving, put out our preparations. And I think that's what's important right now when I'm talking, is that you realize it's like going on vacation. When Jesus says be ready and look up, he's saying pack your suitcase for your vacation or, to move to a new home, okay? And before you leave, you start packing the things you want and the things that you think you should not bother with and leave behind. And that's kind of how our life is. We should be looking at our life. Right now, we should be looking at our life really hard, deciding what we want to keep spiritually and what we want to toss out in our lives. Okay? This is our last time to be prepared and get ready. What you haven't done, or if you've been waiting for that time to come till you packed your bag, now's the time to start packing that bag. Okay? And I'm going to explain why today. So, the title of this message is We Have Heard It All Before, So Why Now? Excuse me. All right. Well, since 2019, the world's been upside down. I don't care who you are, by now, you know that the world is not the same since 2019. And it's never going to be. It's not supposed to ever be meant to be the same. Sorry. I had a bug. I didn't know if it was a spider or what. So we're going to go into this. We're going to start, the Bible is split in two forms. God starts out, whether it's through Jesus or what. I'm not sure exactly how that works, but I believe the Old Testament is God speaking. And then he lets Jesus take over into the New Testaments. It's kind of the way I see it and understand it. So we're going to first go into what God says. He's going to tell us why now matters, why now is the time, okay? So to start, he lays the groundwork for us to understand the most important prophecy, which is Joel 3. But before that, and he goes, and it's funny, if you look in the Bible, it goes in the right order, okay? We're going to go to Isaiah 11:11, where he writes, "It shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall set his hand again the second time. This is important to understand because this is what brings together the timetable of what's coming. Okay, so he sets his hand again the second time to recover the remnant of his people who are left. And then he goes to say from the world, describing different places after that. So understand that Israel was, the people were taken from Israel twice. The first time was in Babylonia. They were only taken to Babylon, back to the kingdom of Babylon. And then 70 years later, they were brought back. And then Jesus predicts this when he's there, okay? Because in 70 AD, after Christ's death, but while Jesus was in his mission, he told his disciples that, there'll come a day when not one stone will be left on one another in Jerusalem, in his temple. And this came in 70 AD, this was true. It came to pass that Rome came. When he did this, So when he did this, his people were spread all over the world. When Rome destroyed the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, they took their people and they spread them. And they were no longer a nation again for the second time. Now, this is important, all right? So he's telling us, he's starting out in Isaiah 11 telling us that I'm going to gather my people again for the second time. Never has been happened. Never in history of the world has a nation been gathered twice. Now, then he tells us, he moves further, and then he brings it up again. In Isaiah 66, 8, this is what the Lord says. This is what God, through Isaiah, says. Who has seen such things? Who has seen or heard such a thing? Who has seen such things? Shall the earth be made to give birth in one day? Or a nation, now we know he's talking about Israel, or shall a nation be born at once? For as soon as Zion, that's his people, his country, was in labor, okay, she gave birth to her children, okay? She became a nation in a day. This is what God says, all right? This happened May 14th, 1948. May 14th, 1948. Now, it's important to understand it because people say, well, everybody thought it was, the tribulation when Hitler was in reign and the Jews were all killed and all this stuff. I get there's been a lot of times when people have thought it was the end of the world. Okay, but they didn't have the right knowledge to understand it. Okay, and this is what he's telling us. He's preparing us for his next prophecy that will tell us the time that all this stuff is set. The end days, the last hour is put into motion. Okay, and he's telling us it all started when his nation and his people were gathered for a second time and became a nation in one day. We see that happen in May 14th, 1948. And it's important that we understand that date because I'm going to get into the rest of another point by doing that. So let's go to what I believe is the most important prophecy to a Christian. Okay? He wants us to know about everything that's going to go through Revelations and everything, but the most important prophecy for a Christian is Joel 3. And he says, now, he set the groundwork, the foundation for this right here. He says, for behold, in those days, speaking of now, when he's gathered his people again for the second time, in those days, at the time when I bring back the captives of Judah and Jerusalem, again, he's letting us know when he brought his people back in one day for the second time, okay, I will also gather all nations. Now, what do we see? Okay, he says, I will also gather all nations and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat. Jehoshaphat is Armageddon. So what do we see right now? Now, I've explained that in my message about the context of the mark of the beast. But first, he brings out the change in 2019. In 2020, he uses that change. He uses pandemic as the machine to deliver the mark of the beast. Okay? Now, I'm going to go into that a little bit later too, but not right now. Okay? But he says, I will also gather all the nations and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat, Armageddon. Now, that's the second coming. He's not talking about the rapture at this point. He's just talking about a time period when he will start everything and end everything. Okay? Now, what do we see in the world today? in the position of what's going on. Okay? We see all the nations of the world gathered together. And don't misunderstand this. I feel very bad for the people of Ukraine, okay? But what do we see? What do we really see? Everybody's focused on this war and everything that's going on, which they want you to, excuse me, drinking my coffee. They want you to be focused on this. They don't want you to be focused on the fact that all the nations are gathered above Israel in Ukraine. They're all sticking their chest out in a war, and speaking of other wars, so it's wars and rumors of wars. Okay, these are signs and wonders. Okay, and signs and wonders are when we start seeing the first seals already happening before the tribulation. Okay, that's how we know. The signs and wonders are how we know that we are on the doorstep. Okay, now, so we see that. We also see all the kings of the east focused towards Taiwan, away from this right now, right? Just as it's said in the Bible, okay, in Revelation. Now, we also see the Euphrates River, the mighty Euphrates River. And by the way, it runs straight through the Garden of Eden. We don't know where or where at what point. So I believe Revelation says when it dries up, that he'll release these angels, the demonic angels, that will kill a third of the world. Have you taken a look at what's going on with that river? That's right. Right now, it's drying up. It's almost completely dried up. And I believe through the next couple of years, it will dry completely up. Okay, I believe that in heaven, this river has been turned off or slowed down. They've slowed the water down. They're getting ready to turn it all the way off. Okay, it's drying up. Now, this is one of the most mightiest rivers in the world up until now. Okay, so I'm going to read this again. I've given you all the information. Okay. For behold, in those days and at that time, we know is now because we have Israel again for the second time. When I bring back the captives of Judah and Jerusalem, I will also for behold, in those days and at that time, when I bring back the captives of Judah and Jerusalem, I will also gather all nations and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat, Armageddon. And I will enter into judgment with them. Now, this is important. He tells us why. Okay? He tells us why. And I will enter in judgment with them there at Armageddon, Jehoshaphat, the valley of Jehoshaphat. This is at the foot of the valley. This is where Jesus makes his second. Sorry, we had another mower go by. So anyways, kind of feel like Satan's trying to get in the way of this. So, he tells us why. Okay? And he's talking about the second return of Christ. He says, they have divided up my land. They have scattered on account of my people, my heritage, Israel. He believes this is his own personal property on earth. He owns the world, but this is his personal. This is like his home, God's home. Okay. And by the way, that's where in Revelations it says he'll return to be with us and live among us. Now, he says, on account of my heritage, Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations, that's his people, and they have divided up my land. Okay, these are the reasons why he's doing this. Now, what do we see? we see they gave up the Gaza Strip. There have been pressure on them continuously to give up more land. And ironically, around the time where I think the rapture will happen, they're going to be voting to turn Israel into a two-state nation. Israel never allowed this. This is going to start. This is what's going to bring on the start of the actual tribulation. Okay. And in a minute, I'm going to explain how the last 7 years fits exactly into this timetable. Okay. So, we see a timetable, when it starts, when it ends, and we see why. Okay? Now, this is just something that you cannot deny. It's something that happens. He tells you that it only happened once. It's never going to happen again. Okay? So that eliminates any question of why now. This is why. So why now? This is why. Okay? Now, let's go into what Jesus says about this. Okay? First we heard from God himself. Now we're going to listen and hear what his son Jesus says. And, you know, it's funny because, again, when you talk about the rapture, they beat you up about, blasphemy, guessing the days and the things and everything. It doesn't say anywhere in the Bible there's a blasphemy for it. It just says he's just being completely honest with us and says he doesn't know. He says the only person who will know is the Father. And I'm going to explain what I think the rapture is going to look like in another message. And I'm going to go into detail about that, but not right now. Okay? But it says, and the reason why I brought that up now is it says, we're going to look in Matthew 24:32 in the parable of the fig tree. Okay? Now learn this parable from the fig tree. And this is all Jesus speaking. If you look, it's all in red writing. Okay? This is Jesus himself speaking. Okay? This is what he says, okay, about this. When its branches are already become tender and it puts forth leaves, you know that summer is near. Okay, well, we've seen the summer come. He's telling you the summer before is the time to start getting ready, because the day's going to come. You're not going to know when it is. You're not going to know the day or the hour. So you need to start packing your suitcase now. Start throwing out everything that's not spiritual that's in your life and start getting spiritually in your relationship with Christ. Okay? Now's the time to start really getting to know Jesus, because you're going to see him soon. Soon, people. Okay. I get fired up with this because it's so important. People just don't get it. And most won't. It says that most will perish because they did not love the truth. So they die by the lie. Okay? So let's continue. When its branches are already tender and puts forth its leaves, you know that summer is near. So also, when you see all these things, now when he says all these things, he's talking about what's going on. Okay? And he's also talking, and we're going to get into that as we read a little bit further, he's also talking about the beginning of God's timetable. When this stuff happens, when this starts, it's the super sign. Israel is a super sign of the end of his plan. Okay, and he says, so also when you see all these things, know that it is near at the doors. He's telling us. He wants us to know it's close and that we're getting there, okay? He may not know exactly what that day and hour is, but he's telling you it's getting close enough that at this point I can show up on your doorstep anywhere. Now, I know, and this is the big thing that cracks me up about the church, is they've been saying, well, we've been expecting him for 2,000 years. No, we haven't. Okay? No, we haven't. I believe that Joel 3 is the time of the last days. And he's telling us literally, okay, it is near, at the doors. He even puts an apostrophe or whatever it is in there to emphasize it. It's at your doorstep now. Now, people, now. Okay? Assuredly, this is what he says about Joel 3. Assuredly, I say to you, this generation will not pass away till all these things take place. Heaven and earth will pass away. He's telling us the old heaven and the old earth. But my words will not by no means pass away. So he's telling you, this is my word. I'm telling you, get ready because the time is coming. It's here. And now the question is, what's a generation? Well, let's look in the Bible because it tells us everything. You know, I've been getting a lot of flack about the Bible lately from this, of course, coming out of the Catholic Church. But that's another time, another story. But we go to understand this, we go to Psalms. Okay? In Psalms, we go to Psalms 90. 90:10. And this is where we see what a generation looks like to God on earth. Okay? He says, now remember when I said I was going to explain to you how it fits perfectly in his timetable? This is part of explaining that. In the days of our lives are 70 years. And if by reason of strength they are 80 years, yet their boast is only labor and sorrow. He's talking about our life on earth. Our life here is labor and sorrow. That was the curse. Okay? For it is soon cut off and we fly away. That means that our bodies sleep and we're raised to whatever place we're supposed to go. Okay, now before I say this, understand, I get that some people will live to 100 and some will die at birth. He's talking about the generation itself, not individuals, special situations. He's talking about, in general, a generation. Okay? Now, remember I was going to explain how it fits perfectly in his prophecy, the time. We are now 73 years into the Joel 3 prophecy. Not 72, not 74. We're 73. Okay? Because we know it's not 70 years because we're into 73. So it must be 80 years. 80 years, the last 7 years of that 80 years fits in with God's own calendar that he goes by, the Shemitah year. Now, a lot of people don't know what that is, but every 7 years on the week is 7 days, and the years of time is 7 years at a time. And then he goes to 48, the 7 times 7 years, which is 49 years, which is a Jubilee year. So you have the week with the Sabbath day. You have the Shemitah year with the Sabbath year, okay? And you have a time of 49 years, which is the Jubilee year. Now, the Jubilee year, which I believe starts the actual tribulation, is around October 5th. Time is getting late. It's getting late, people. Okay. Now, the significance of the Jubilee is, number one, it's the 70th Jubilee year, which started when Moses' people entered Israel the first time. Okay. I believe it times up with Daniel's 70th day, or 70th week in Daniel. Perfectly. And the Shemitah year starts on the new Teshuvah 1 Jewish calendar of the new year, which starts in September, I think. This year, it normally starts on the 15th, but it's moved, on a Jubilee year, it's moved ahead. No, it's moved back 10 days, which puts it at the 26th of September. I keep telling you, this thing's close. Now, we're only looking at 6 to 8 days away for this. Now, understand, it starts, the next Shemitah that fits perfectly in God's 80-year time table starts September 26th. September 26th, 25th or 26th. I can't remember exactly. It's one of those two dates. I don't have those notes in front of me right now. And it ends in the 7-year ends in 2028-29. There's your timetable. That's why. That's the 80 years that began in May 1948. Okay? God laid it out for us to understand it. Jesus told us why. He told us from his perspective the way it should be. We know this is written in the book of God. That means it's written in stone, literally in stone. The stone of heaven, the stone of Christ, the foundation of Christ, the foundation of the beginning, the foundation of everything, the beginning and the end. It's written. It will happen. Every prophecy so far in the Bible has come true. And it has to happen for every other prophecy to happen. So, this is why now, people. Now, we're going to talk about this just a little bit. Okay, that's why. But I'm going to talk about some of the other things that are going on right now that also add up to this. Okay, and let me put this away real quick. So we're going to go into some of the events that are happening, and some have come into play since last Thursday. Okay. That's soon. So here's some of the things. We see that they're trying. Well, let's start with the signs and wonders. Okay. Jesus, when his disciples on the Mount of Olives, ironically, where he'll come back for the second time, he also explained what's going to happen. Everything has meaning in the Word of God. People don't realize that. I've come to learn this. And God showed me a lot of it. You know, I can't tell you that I've read that thing. Well, I think I have read it all the way through, but I don't retain. It was a long time ago, and I don't retain a lot of it. But God's led me to everything and where to find everything. And what He hasn't, He's led me to. If He didn't give me the actual verse, I went back and found it. But it's all been in the Bible. It's all documented. It's all backed in the Bible. Everything I say, I don't say nothing unless I know it's in the Bible. Even when God shows it to me or tells me to it or breathes it into me. whether it's Jesus, the Holy Spirit, or him himself. I don't know. I don't know the time he has, if it's even important enough for him, to come to me personally. I imagine he sends Jesus or his angels or the Holy Spirit. So I just know everything I know from what God has led me to. And, since 2019, he tells us, when he sits down with his disciples, they ask him, what will be the sign of your return? And what will be the sign of the end of the age? And he tells us the first thing, he goes on to a lot of other things. Okay? But the first thing he tells us is that there'll be a deception that won't just be regional or local, whatever. It'll blanket the world. And for the first time in the history of man, we see a pandemic that clearly was man-made. They can't seem to, the whole world's working on it, but they can't seem to tell you for sure how it came out or why. They scared everybody into giving up their freedoms, going to church, closing down commerce. The list goes on and on. Social distance, splitting us away from each other, even keeping families away from family in their homes. There's jokes. It's funny. I got one on my phone. But there's jokes about, I guess your devices, your fridge and everything, they're monitoring. There's a cough and a lady, it says the cough has been detected, like 25 different variants later. None of this is in the natural way of the earth up until this point. Okay? It all changed in 2019. Now, what's happening now? That was 2019. What's happening now? Well, we see that Iran has made it clear that if they have a nuclear weapon, they're going to hit Israel with it. Now, Israel's the size of a small state like Delaware or something, okay? One bomb is enough to kill everybody. This cannot happen. If it happens, every single prophecy cannot happen after Joel 3. There can't be the desolation, the Antichrist desolating the new temple. There can't be a new temple. There can't be anything. All these prophecies. There won't be Israel to return to, for Christ to return to his second coming. So Satan's working really hard to stop all this stuff. He knows that if he can stop prophecy, then he wins. He cannot win. God will never allow this. Okay, so we see that Iran has a bomb. They claim they have a bomb right now. But they're waiting for the sanctions and all that to be lifted. Well, right about the time that the new Jewish year starts, which is Rosh Hashanah, which is the festival of trumpets, where I believe that we will hear the shofar trumpet on the last trumpet to be called up. And I believe that because of Joel 3 and what's going on. And I know that if it goes past 80 years, then again, it falls out of the line of prophecy. It has to happen in prophecy. For it to be 100% it has to happen. So we see them. They actually have a missile. I have a picture of a missile. I'm going to post all this. With the name of Israel on it, where Muhammad had beat Israel the only time he fought him. The only time they lost to Muhammad. And so we know they determined to do this. Now, they're going to be voting a couple of things They're going to vote to give Iran unrestricted access to nuclear weapons. They're going to vote for Israel to become a two-state nation. They're going to vote in, and I've just been learning this, they're going to vote in something called the Mossad laws. Now, there's 7 of what I think is 10 of the commandments, of the 10 commandments that God gave Moses. It must have been what he gave him to get started with when he led his people from Egypt. And just like this thing with Roe versus Wade, it's going to sound like a win for the church, but it's not. It's a deception, okay? And I'm going to explain this to you. They're also voting, they also Thursday adopted, they voted on it in 2019, but the Religious Center of the United Nations just voted in Chrislam Thursday. They adopted it. They actually adopted it moving forward. Now they're going to vote in this Mossad. Let me explain Mossad to you from what I understand. It sounds like the 10 Commandments, and it sounds great. And the thing that Christians are going to really think it's a win for is because it's going to say that everybody, the whole world, every religion has to acknowledge the Creator, the one and only Creator. Now that sounds great. That really sounds like they're acknowledging God. Okay? But when the Antichrist comes on the scene and he tells you in the religious helper, which I believe is already pushing all this stuff, he's the one that headed this new thing that's part of what's heading, working with the Israel priest to get all this stuff in. You know, Israel's going for all this stuff because right now they're under the deception and they think it's a win. They think they're getting everything they ever wanted. They're ecstatic about this, if I'm using the word right or pronouncing it right. But so they're going to vote this in. It's going to become a law. Okay. They're also voting in giving sovereignty, medical sovereignty, which has no limits in our Constitution, by the way, to give us to give, not us, but to take our medical sovereignty away from us and to give it into the hands of the United Nations and the WHO. Okay, all this stuff is getting voted on. Okay, they're not talking about it; they're keeping it from us. But there's there's watchers all over the world that are monitoring and watching this stuff and are seeing this stuff come up. Okay, and a lot of people will sit there and say, "Well, you know, what article did you get this out of? What did you do that?" It doesn't matter. I got it from a solid source. If these are the watchers, they're watching for this stuff, okay? And some of this stuff is actually in the news, and I've tried to screen save a lot of it. But when this happens, they can declare anything a medical hazard. The next mass shooting that happens, well, we're going to take your guns away because it's a threat to your health, to the health of everybody else around you. Well, they're not going to do that. It's in my constitutional rights. Well, no, it's not. Because every country that's a member of the United Nations will sign this, which means they're going to turn their sovereignty rights over to the United Nations. That's right. So when you sit there and make all this noise about they're not going to take this, they're not going to do that, they are going to do that. That's how they're going to take away every way you can resist them when the Antichrist gets here. Okay, he's here. He hasn't been revealed, but he's here. And Our leaders are slipping and saying all kinds of things. This thing that happened with England, I mean, honestly, it's very coincidental that she's passing away right now before all this stuff is to take place and Charles steps in. And we have him saying that the world has to be under martial law for climate control, and that billions and trillions need to be at his disposal. Who's his? Who's he? They know who he is. He's revealed to certain people. He just isn't revealed to the world yet. So, also, we have red heifers. The first in 2,000 years since Christ. Did you know that they just sent 5 of them to Israel the other day? That's right. They landed at their airport with 5 red heifers. They need this to purify the church when they build the church. So they know that time is coming soon. Okay? And they just had war games to Israel to prepare. They called it Chariots of Fire, a reference to Rome. And they're preparing to fight on 6 fronts. Okay? Even their allies are telling them that they don't give in to this demand for a 2-state nation. They're going to not support Israel. Israel has one of the best oil and gas rights, natural gas rights. And the Muslim nations are threatening. Israel is saying that by September, the end of September, they're going to be drilling these. And they're threatening. They don't want that. They all the Islamic countries want that. They don't want Israel to have it. So we have a power keg ready to blow up. Now, Israel just recently threatened to destroy all the palaces in Damascus. Why is that so important? Isaiah 17 says there will be an attack on Damascus that will level the city to rubble. It'll never be a city again. Well, I believe that Iran is putting all their stuff getting ready to attack Israel from Damascus. Israel's not going to let it happen. Damascus will fall. I believe that'll fall within weeks, if not a month. I believe all this stuff is going to happen within the year 22. It all looks like it's gathering around September. So I'm expecting after the 25th, war breaking out and all kinds of crazy stuff happening. If it's true, I don't know, but this is what I expect. Because there's a time frame and this stuff is getting squashed. That time is being from spread out to closing in to a point. If it's going to happen, as prophecy says, it has to happen. Okay? So, my message is, if you don't know Christ, if you're confused about Christ, if you're ready to accept Him, if you're hanging in limbo, I watched a movie. God pressed a movie on me a year ago, 2020. I didn't watch it for like 6 months. It was an old movie. I didn't think I'd like it. It's called A Thief in the Night. And in this movie, he showed me some of the most beautiful prayers, which touched me. So he helped my relationship with Jesus. He showed me the rapture and how people just are going to make fun of it. I see that. They've been making fun of that every time I speak about it. He showed me what it's going to probably look like. Not exactly, because this movie was made in 70, but close to it. But it's going to look like the mark of the beast and how it will be used. But one of the things he showed me in this movie was, and it's weird because he keeps pressing me to go back to it, like he wants it fresh in my mind. I'll forget about it, then he'll pop it up. And then the only thing I can say is when he leads me to something, he pushes me and presses me until I do it. Yeah, even if I don't want to do it, he'll press me. Even in my calling, I resisted it. And like Jonah in the well, he just kept pushing me to it until he sent me every June since 2019. He sent me a calling. One, my calling, which I didn't fully understand. Then he sent a second calling saying that I wasn't using my calling. The very next day, I got an email from a school that I was looking into to get into for ministry. And it said, we don't think that you should be this, but this is what we think what you should be doing. So the second calling came a day later with actual instructions exactly what to do. And that's what I've been doing. And then a third, all in June, said what I felt the second time was an anointing. I mean, you can't argue with all that stuff. It's just the way it is, you know. I've had people to say that it wasn't God, it was Satan, it was this. And then God will send me some kind of reassurance that, you know, people will do this and people do that, don't. Like, I can't explain it, but he sends me reassurances all the time. Okay, I know you're thinking twice about this. I know you're this. Because he knows my biggest fear is to speak as a false prophet. That's why I check everything. I go back to everything. When I tell you I know something, believe me, I went back and looked at it before I started talking about it. And, you know, he'll send me, if I question or somebody shakes me a little bit, he'll immediately send reinforcement. So when I tell you God talks to me, he does. Sometimes it's like a small whisper, which talks about that in the Bible. Sometimes it's a dream. Sometimes a daydream. Sometimes I'm driving down the road and all of a sudden he'll take my mind. I'm driving, but he'll take my mind somewhere else and he'll show me something or tell me something. And then he'll put me back, okay, everything's out, you're fine, you're here now. It sounds crazy. Maybe I'm crazy. But it's true. Every word of it, it's the truth. Truly I tell you, like Jesus says, as his example, truly I tell you, I'm not lying to you. So, the rapture could be days away. This stuff is going to happen days to a couple weeks away. And when it happens, there's a guy in Germany, he's one of the parliament or something, he said on the 26th, and it's popping up everywhere now, on the 26th, people are going to remember where they were that day. I don't know what he's talking about, but everything seems to fall around Rosh Hashanah and the new year of the Hebrew year, which will start